All right, so it appears like Joe Biden has fired, or at the very bare minimum, pressured some of his staffers to resign over smoking marijuana. Yeah, we are in the year 2021, with half the fucking country already legalizing or legalizing medical marijuana after the 2020 elections in November, when we had multiple states, even conservative states, Republican states, voting to legalize marijuana. Joe Biden is still stuck in the 90s or something. Crime Bill Joe, who wrote the 94 crime bill, still stuck in the 90s. So I'm going to give you some of these details here, and then we're going to talk more about why this is ridiculous. So dozens of young White House staffers have been suspended, asked to resign, or place on remote work program due to past marijuana use, frustrating staffers who were pleased by the initial indications from the Biden administration that recreational use of cannabis would not be immediately disqualifying for would-be personnel, according to 3 people familiar with the situation. So the policy has even affected staffers whose marijuana use was exclusive to one of the 14 states and the District of Columbia where cannabis is legal. Sources familiar with this matter also said a number of young staffers were either put on probation or canned because they revealed past marijuana use in an official document they filled out as part of the lengthy background check for a position in the Biden White House. So, firing people for doing something that is legal. This is no different, no more ridiculous than if Joe Biden were to fire staffers for going and having a beer after work, or for going and having a beer at their last job after work. Okay, we're not talking about people who are smoking weed on the job. That would be the same thing as drinking on the job, and yes, you should get fired for that. But we're talking about, and this gets into a broader picture of this entire conversation, we're talking about the government in this case, or your employer, having the ability to fire you or punish you for doing something outside of work that has no effect on your job, okay? And so if we're going to get into the studies, we're going to get into the science of this, marijuana is safer, it leads to less deaths, there's less consequences from it than alcohol, than smoking cigarettes. We know this is the case, okay? Why should your employer or the government ever be able to tell you what you can put in your body as long as you're not harming others? That really should be the only standard. And so not only should we be talking about right now legalizing marijuana for recreational use, for medical use, and all of that, we should also be talking about decriminalizing at the very minimum, but even legalizing all drugs across the board. You legalize, regulate, and tax them. That's how you would end the drug war. One of the things that Joe Biden pushed in the early parts of his career in the Senate. Joe Biden is one of the reasons why we ended up with the drug war that we still have today, that has incarcerated millions of people, ruined millions of lives, ruined millions of families, all for what? Because like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and a couple of these other conservative freaks from back in the day wanted to criminalize some political people that they didn't like. In the case of marijuana, it was the black community, it was the hippie community that Nixon didn't like. In the case, you look at any of these cases with how drugs actually became illegal, it was never the case that it was like a bunch of scientists got together and said, hey, these drugs are really dangerous, we better make them illegal and schedule them in this way specifically. It was always political. 100% of the time, it was always political. And so it's a political decision to continue maintaining that drug war. Joe Biden said on the campaign trail, like, oh, I'm not sure that I want to legalize weed, I need to wait for more studies to come in. It's ridiculous, okay? We have the definitive studies on this, and to the extent that we are lacking in studies for medical marijuana or for recreational marijuana, well, guess what you would have to do then, Joe Biden? You would have to lower it on the scheduled list, which Joe Biden has the power to do, chooses not to do it. So, deeply unserious person here, Joe Biden. He's clearly just stuck in his old ways back in the 90s when he was writing the crime bill and stuff and prioritizing punishing people for these petty drug crimes that don't have any negative impacts on anybody else. But that's where Joe Biden is, and that's where the United States is apparently right now. This is fucking ridiculous. It's absurd. And so here's one of the excuses that Jen Psaki put out. She says, as a result, more people will serve who would not have in the past with the same level of recent drug use. The bottom line is this: of the hundreds of people hired, only 5 people who had started working at the White House are no longer employed as a result of this policy. Oh, only 5 people. Only 5 people. Yeah, so fuck those 5 people, right? For doing something that is legal and that doesn't have a negative impact on their work and that they weren't doing while they were at work. I mean, this is ridiculous, okay? This is pathetic. This is a pathetic excuse. And as I said in a reply here, It's really pathetic justification here. You guys should be ending the drug war, not perpetuating it. That's what our priority should be. This is, by the way, an overwhelmingly popular issue, okay? The American people across the board, even in, again, like I was saying, even in Republican states, want medical marijuana or recreational marijuana legalized, okay? This is not shouldn't be a controversial issue at all. It would be an overwhelming win for the Democrats if they were to be on the correct side of this. So that's why I don't understand why you would still be doing this. It's just pathetic. And in addition to that, he's balking with his own party. Chuck Schumer says marijuana reform bills are being merged as Congress moves to legalize. So he basically said we should see medical marijuana this year. That's what him and Cory Booker and a couple others have been saying, that would be a priority on Democrats' list for 2021. So where is the details on this? I mean, we had the MORE Act. That was the Marijuana Opportunity and Reinvestment and Expungement Act, which is a decent bill that would deschedule marijuana, legalize it, tax regulate it, and reinvest in communities that have been disproportionately targeted by the drug war. It's a decent bill and expunge the convictions of those convicted with nonviolent drug offenses as well, but that would be a decent bill. Why is Joe Biden not out there vocally supporting that and trying to prioritize that? It would have massive ramifications, not just with the fact that people would have the freedom to do what they want in their own free time, but in addition to that, it would have gigantic implications for our criminal justice system moving forward. So it's a huge opportunity here for Democrats to do something that's extremely popular, that is morally correct, that is politically correct, and even economically correct, because you have the massive benefits of the tax dollars that will come in as a result of selling marijuana. So listen, this entire story is just ridiculous and sad and pathetic, and I feel bad for the staffers who had their careers ruined because some dipshit like Joe Biden, who's stuck in the 90s, is still deciding that marijuana has some sort of negative impact on your career or your ability to do the job. It's just ridiculous, but this is really what we would expect from somebody like Joe Biden. So hopefully we can still push for marijuana legalization through the House and through the Senate. That's going to be a really tough fight, especially if they don't abolish the filibuster first. There's pretty much no way, I don't think, that you're going to get 60 votes on it. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I would think that Republicans who even support legalizing marijuana would have a problem with the other areas of some of those bills, like reinvesting in communities targeted by the drug war, because that's how conservatives operate. But yeah, I mean, this is something we have to keep aggressively fighting for, obviously, because we have a guy in the White House who is still stuck in the 90s and thinks that marijuana is a threat to society or is a threat to people's career aspirations. It's just absolutely ridiculous.